Hello everybody and welcome to the VB Toolbox. In this tutorial I will be covering extension methods, which are a very powerful and amazing tool that it gives us the ability to expand the capabilities of our objects and data types within our application. Imagine, if you will, you have a project that requires a hammer, and so you go to your toolbox and you look in your toolbox and there is no hammer. All you have is a wrench, so you tediously try pounding in nails with your wrench. Now, wouldn't it be much easier if you could just add a hammer to your toolbox? So I want to show you what I mean here. If we go ahead and get started by starting a new project, and I'm just going to call this extensions. Hit OK. We want that to be a Windows Forms application, by the way. First thing we're going to do is, in our Solution Explorer, we'll right-click on our project header and select Add, and we want to select Module from the list. And I'm going to call this module Extensions. Alright, so this is where all the magic happens. Before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and jump into my code here. I'm going to double-click on the main form and say that we have a string. Okay, so we'll just create a random variable here. I'm just going to call it S, and I'm going to make that as a string. And I'm going to set the value to Marvin. Alright, now what if I wanted to append text to this? So I bring up the properties of the string by hitting S and dot, and let's see, I want to append text to this. Oh, I can't. Well, maybe I could if I had the system.text namespace here, but what if I just wanted to find append in here, and I wanted to be able to use that to append text to my string? Well, that is what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, and we're going to jump back into our extensions. Now we need to bring in the Runtime compiler services to give us access to the extensions. So we're going to say imports system.runtime.compiler services. Alright, with that we are ready to begin creating our extensions. So the first one we're going to do is the append text to a string. So we can add on text at the end of this string here. So first thing we need to do is do a less than sign and then add extension. Should pop up there for you if you have the compiler services available. And close that off with a greater than sign, and now we're ready to begin adding our extension. And we have to add this for each extension that we add. So let's go ahead and do a public function because we want to return a value with our text. So say public function append text. Now this first parameter that we add is going to be for the data type or object that we're trying to add an extension for. So in this case it's got to be a string value to bring in the original string. So I'm going to reference that. I'm just going to call the parameter text, and that has to be a string, so we'll say as string. And any additional parameters will be usable from the outside when we go to actually call this function from our properties menu. So we want to be able to not just bring in the text, but also have the value that we want to append to our string. So I'm going to say val as string. Now the value we have to return from this function is going to be a string, so I'm going to say as string. Now we're ready to begin building our function. So we can all we have to do here is just return the value that we want. So we're going to return text. That's the original string that we're sending through this extension, and concatenate on the value. Excuse me. So that's pretty simple. Wow. Now if we come back here and we want to append text to our string here, when we say s dot app, it brings up the append text. So there it is. It's in our list. So we now have more functionality to our string data type. So let's try this out. Say Marvin, add a space because it's going to append it directly on, is cool. Of course, that's not going to do much for us here. Let's report it as a message box. Say report message box. It's going to return our original text with the appended text, if it works properly. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and look at that, popped up, showed Marvin is cool. So we have successfully extended our string data type. So let's go ahead and add a couple more just for fun. I'm going to go back into my extensions and I'm going to add another extension. This one I'm going to call Prefix. So say we want to append something to the beginning of the string. Again, we're going to make a public function, and I'm going to call it Prefix, and the type of object that I want to extend with my extension is going to be a string, so I'm going to bring in my text as a string. And again, I want to append a value, so I'm going to add a second parameter as string. And finally, I'm going to output my function as a string. Awesome. Now this time I'm going to say return value first, concatenate on a space so we don't have to worry about spacing, and add the original text. And it should be happy. Now if we come back here, S should have an additional tool in its toolbox. So let's look for Prefix, and there it is. I go ahead and take off Append Text, message box, Prefix, and I'm going to say Sir. Let's go ahead and see how that runs. Sir Marvin, it worked just fine. Now the cool thing about this, as long as we're in a string data type, we will have access to that. So we could actually keep adding on more prefixes. You can add more than one prefix. So we could do this. The awesome Sir Marvin. Notice how the last one was added before the first one. So that's something to keep in mind, the order in which these are added. The last one's added first, and the first one's added last. It just goes down the chain. Alright, so let's go ahead and add one more string extension for fun. This time I'm going to add a suffix extension. I'm just going to copy this, because it's going to be almost identical. And I'm going to change the name to Suffix. Again, we're using in text and value. The only difference is we're going to invert these. We're going to move the value to the last place because we want it to append the text to the end. So let's say text and val. Now let's come back here, and I'm going to take off this second one, and I'm going to append to this string with the prefix a suffix. I'm going to say the magnificent. Alright, so it should add both of these onto this string. Sir Marvin the Magnificent. It's pretty awesome, isn't it? Now, of course, these are, you know, kind of silly additions to make to your toolbox, but you never know when they might come in handy. And there are some very, very valuable ones that we could add too, which we'll get to later. I'll do some more realistic examples, I guess you could say. Let's go ahead and do one for integers. What if we wanted to, we've extended the string. Now, what if we wanted to extend integers? Well, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to jump back into my extensions here, and let's add another extension. Just going to copy that. I don't know why that. I hate typing that out. And I'm going to say public function and add 1, and this time I'm going to be extending the integer, so I'm going to say value as integer. The name of the parameter isn't really important so much as the data type that you're extending, so keep that in mind. And we're not going to add any additional parameters because this is going to it has one function here, and that's just to add 1 to whatever number we pass to it. So we're going to return the value as an integer, and this time we'll say return val plus 1. Wow, these are easy. So message box, actually should probably, yeah, I'll tell you what. Just gonna comment that one out so we don't have a million message boxes popping up here. Message box, we need to make a variable first. DMI as integer equals 1. So message box I. Oops. I think I'm getting tired here. And run that, and so it says 1. Now, what if we took our integer and ran our new extension on it? No parameters, just add 1. Look at that. So I'm sure that there are some valid uses for something like that. One that is very common is when you are iterating through an array or a list of items, the indexes are 0 based. So when you do, for I equals 0 to, some object dot count, you always have to add a -1 to the end because it's 0 based. Otherwise, you end up going outside of your array bounds. So what we could do, and again, that's it's a fairly minor action to have to take, but what if your integer values had a -1? Let's say -1. Again, value is integer. And now we wouldn't have to use an operator in there. We could just say message box. Wow, I keep doing that. I dot -1. Again, we've extended our integer. So look at that. Makes it 0 based. That's kind of cool. So what if we wanted to do something a little more useful to our programming? Let's go ahead and go to our main form, and I'm going to add a couple of form items here. How about a ListBox? ListBox is something that, it's very useful, but it's lacking some features, and so we're just going to add them ourselves. I'm going to go ahead and drop on a button as well. And you can call those whatever you want. I just need something to give us some actions here. I'm going to leave the default names this time. So if we go back into our form code here and look at some of the things that ListBox has. Let's say ListBox 1 dot, and here's all of its properties and methods and events. One thing that I like when it comes to collections using a list, if we do dim L as list of string, okay? I'll make that a new list. Alright, so we've created a collection here, and if we look at L's methods here, you get a list of all the things that it can do. Now, something that list has that ListBox does not have is a ToList function. Okay, so you can copy one list to another instance of the list to modify the original list. And it sounds tedious, but that's actually the way you need to do it when you're removing items from a list, because if you're cycling through a list, for each item in your list, oops, in L, because that's our list, you can't do L dot, if L equals horse, then, oh, I'm sorry. Wow, I'm getting all my variables mixed up. They're not very intuitive. Sorry about that. So say if I equals horse and we wanted to remove horses from the list, I couldn't just say, list I or index of I. I don't know if you can call those by their name. You have to use the index, list I index of I dot remove, because if you're iterating through it with a loop, it changes the index value. So instead of doing for each I, you could do for I equals 0 to the count minus 1, and remove those items based on their values. But you can't do that. You have to copy it to another list using the TwoList, and then modify that the values from the original list from the copy, because you're not cycling through the copy. So you could say for each item in list.TwoList, and then it becomes a copy of the original list, and you can delete stuff. I hope that wasn't too confusing, sorry. Anyway, what if we wanted to extend our ListBox to have a TwoList function? Because it doesn't have it. It'd be kind of handy if we wanted to make a copy of that list for some reason. So let's go ahead and add an extension to that. Copy that, bring it down here, and we'll say public function TwoList, and we're going to access the items directly from the ListBox object collection. So rather than bringing in the list or creating a reference to the ListBox itself, we're going to create a reference to the list items collection. Okay, so to do that, since the items collection is what we want to actually modify, not the list itself, we want to create the items list from this. So we're going to say items as ListBox dot control collection. All right. So we're going to send this control collection, the list of items, to a new list. And then we're going to return a new list of, and this is very important. You need something that, since a list collection can really be any data type, it's good to use sort of something that's more nebulous and can be used for pretty much anything, and that is the object. All right. So an object can be pretty much anything. So it sort of makes it not care what you pass in. It could be strings, it could be a list of integers, it could be a list of whatever. Of course, in the case of our list box here, they're going to be strings. Next up, we're going to say dim, and we'll just use my list as a new list of object. Alright, so that creates the new list that we want to return from this function. And now we need to populate that new list with the items that are in our list box. So we're just going to loop through that. I'm going to do a basic for each loop. I'm going to say for each item in items my list dot add I. So each thing that it finds in this list box collection, it's going to add to this new list that it's going to return. So here we'll just say return my list. Again, that's really pretty simple. Passing in our item collection, this is what we're extending actually and passing in, and returning a new list. So we should be able to see that now. If I say ListBox1 dot, oh, this is what I was talking about earlier, trying to explain. If we try accessing ToList from here, it's not going to show up because we didn't add it to the list box. We're not passing the list box directly. We're passing a reference to the items collection right here. Now if we do ToList, uh-oh, I must have messed up here. Oh, great. Now we have to figure out what I messed up on here. Did we turn that properly? Oh, I see it. Sorry. What I did wrong here is I had control collection in there. I was too busy talking and not watching what I was doing. I want the object collection, not the control collection. Sorry about that. Now, let's try this again. Items dot TwoList. There we are. Whew. Now, how can we use this? Well, first off, we're going to have to add some items to our list box here. So I'm going to go over to my items collection and just add a few items here. Throw in some animals. I'm going to throw in a horse, throw in a chicken, throw in a raven, how about a horse, and a sparrow. At least gives us something to work with here. Let's go ahead and get rid of this guy. And I'm going to silence these message boxes. Gonna go back to my main form and double click on button 1. And one thing we can do to use this, let's just say for each item in list box 1.items. Whoops. Let's send that to list and see if it copied the items properly to our list. Say message box I. And we'll go ahead and run that. We'll hit our button, and now it should loop through that list and show each critter in the list. So that's working properly. We weren't reporting the items directly from the list box, rather we were copying it to a list and reporting what was in the list. Another thing we could try doing is a simple lambda expression. These are kind of crazy and fun. Say ListBox 1 dot items dot TwoList, use our TwoList, dot something that a list has, the list collection, as opposed to the ListBox, is a for each method. And with this we can execute a command for every item that it finds in that list. So what we can do is say sub, create a nameless sub inside of here, x being the parameters and object, and then what this x is going to represent is each item that it returns in the list, each item that it finds. So we'll run an expression on that. I'm going to say if x equals horse, then ListBox, calling back to the original ListBox 1 dot items dot remove the item that it found in the list, x. Okay. So it's going to use this to loop through the same. It's the same as doing you know, for each I and items, then run this subroutine. Okay, but it's kind of cool because it condenses it down to a single line. So each item it finds, if the item's a horse, then remove it. Let's see if that works. Check that out. All of our horses are gone from our list box. Pretty sweet. So we have successfully extended this list box. What if we wanted to simplify that whole thing? Instead of converting it to a list and removing the items, let's go ahead and go back to our extensions. We're going to do one more extension. And this one could actually be very useful, I think. So I'm going to say extension. And this time, you know, as you've noticed, we've been returning values this whole time, rather than just creating actions. So this time we're not going to return a value. We're just going to make a command to actually do something. So I'm going to say public sub remove containing. Okay, so it's going to scan through the list box, and anything, any string that we find that is contained in it, will fire an action on that. So we'll say, again, I want to access the object collection, so I'm going to loop through the items as ListBox dot object collection. I'm going to make that mistake again. And what I want to search for is a value, so I'm going to enter my search value here. I'm going to say val as string, and we're not returning a value, so we don't have to add a data type to the end. And now I'm going to pretty much do the same thing that I did before with this lambda expression, except for I'm going to build it directly into the extension, so we don't have to type this out every time we want to utilize it. So I'm going to say items, referencing the item object collection, dot ToList dot for each, and this time I'm going to say sub x if x dot toString, convert it to a string from whatever it is, dot, now because it's a string, we now have access to all of our string commands that we've added. You can see our prefix here, you can see our suffix and our append. That's kind of cool. So you can actually access one extension from another. That's something that's worth noting, I think. But all I want to do is see if it contains the value. that we've added in our parameters. So if you want to remove an item with a specific value, then items, being the item control collection or object collection, dot remove and remove X. So scan through the list, execute a subroutine on each item that is found, the item being X, convert that item to a string, use its contains method to find the value, and then if it finds the value, then remove the item from the object collection. So that could be pretty useful. Now we can scan. I'm going to go ahead and silence this here. And I'm going to call this new sub from our command button. So going back to our button click event, I'm going to say ListBox dot items. Whoops, it's got to be ListBox1 dot items. And now we should have remove containing. This did not exist before. So now we have a new tool in our toolbox, and this is pretty awesome. So let's, before we throw anything in here, let's just pick something randomly here. I'm just going to throw in a couple of characters, AV. How about that? So now, when we click our button, anything containing the letters AV should be found and removed. So let's go ahead and do that. Boom, found the raven. What's another one? I'll just try remove anything containing the letters SE. There go the horses, because they both had SE in them. So you can see how that might be a really useful tool for doing specific types of removals. And of course, the sky's the limit. You can really use this to extend these objects in any way that you want. You can add any number of tools to your toolbox. So very powerful tool. There's some just amazing potential here, and I love this one. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I apologize that I was so tired today and kind of stumbling over my words, but I appreciate you hanging in there and watching. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up, and I appreciate the subscription. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.